Welcome to the Spirit-Led Podcast, your guide on a journey to full enlightenment in this beautiful life. I'm your host, Joan Hope Craig. Each episode, we explore spiritual wisdom, life's purpose, and the profound impact of daily choices on our personal growth and the world. Well, hello, Furio. Thank you so much for joining.
Hi, it's a pleasure for me.
Yeah. Let me tell the audience a little bit about you. Furio Sclano has been practicing Kriya Yoga since 1995. So this is your 30-year anniversary this year. You met Roy Eugene Davis 1 year later in 96 and were ordained in 2005. So another anniversary. And you live in Italy and practice and teach in Genoa, Milan, and Turin.
Well, we changed a little bit a few years ago, just when COVID arrived. We used to do seminars basically all over Italy. In the last couple of years, three years, we changed our habits a little bit. We do 3-day seminars 3 or 4 times a year. 3 of them, we do them close to where we live in Liguria, close to Genoa. Savona is the place. And then we do one in the center of Italy, usually. And then we do lots of online stuff, twice a week we do online meditations, and once a month we also give some lessons and so on. Okay, I'm not alone. There is a friend of mine, her name is Manuela Laiacona. She does all this stuff with me. And so we are active this way. We do lots of things, basically.
Yeah, and we'll hear more about that today, I hope. Let's go back in time to because I think the story of how you found Mr. Davis was pretty interesting, and I would love the listeners to hear it. Could you share how you found Mr. Well, actually, maybe even go back a little bit further. Share what you were looking for when you found Kriya Yoga for the first time, and then
absolutely
how you found...
nothing. Absolutely nothing. Things happen by chance. Chance this way, we say. My companion, my partner, was at the time, we are talking about 1994, I think. She was following SRF. We had a common friend who was a follower of Self-Realization Fellowship. So my girlfriend started meditating at the time. I was not very interested. Then, but about a few months later, I decided to read the autobiography of a yogi. It was, I think, 1994. And after a while, I decided to apply for the SRF lessons. And I remember that when I read the first lessons that arrived in my house, at home, I said to myself, I already know this stuff. I already read it somewhere. Maybe it was just something crossing my mind in some way. And so I started meditating for about 15 minutes a day for a few weeks. Then I increased my practice and I went on that way. Then there was a small group in my town with people. A part of them was following SRF. Some other was following Ananda, the Ananda community. There is a big Ananda community in Italy. And one of them, I remember Enrico is his name, told me, Furio, next week I'm going to Ananda for a few days. Why don't you come with me so that you may visit Ananda? And I said, okay. And I went with him. And it was February 1996. We arrived there about 8 o'clock in the evening. After dinner, there was not any program during that day. And my friend was tired and he went to bed. I was still a little bit awake. They had, in the main building, they had a video room. At that time, there were not DVDs, there were VHS cassettes, There was a big shelf with maybe 200 cassettes on it. and many of them were without cover. I randomly took one of them. I read Centennial of the Birth of Paramahansa Yogananda. That video had been recorded by Ananda, California, 3 years before, somewhere in the United States, I think in Ananda, California, maybe, I'm not sure. And the cassette hadn't been rewound, so it started from the middle. I inserted the cassette in the player, and guess who was the first person who appeared in front of me? It was Mr. Davis. I had never heard about him before. I really liked the character because I remember that he was dressed as a businessman with that big tie, a big ring, I remember. I was hit by the personality. So I made some search when I went home, and I discovered that 2 books of his had been already published in Italy. Obviously not translated by me. One was Creative Imagination, and the other was The Science of Kriya Yoga, very old books. I ordered the books, I read them, I liked them, and I decided to write a very simple letter written by hand, So I wrote to CSA, and I remained astonished by the fact that he replied to me in person, okay? Probably Kathleen had taped with the typewriter, had written with the typewriter the answer, but I was astonished by the fact that Mr. Davis replied to me in person. So I decided to start receiving the Truth Journal. And I happened to write him a few times during those years. Then after a couple of years, I remember that I also became a member. At the beginning, I only used to receive the Truth Journal. Then I received a letter one day that he was about to come to Europe for a series of lectures. He used to go to Germany and then to London. I was undecided whether to go in Germany or in London. I decided to go in England. And it was, I don't remember, could have been April 2000, so 25 years ago. And that was the first time I met him in person. It was a very funny occasion because the English minister, unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. He was a very nice man. His name was Richard Fish. And his wife also, she's not with us anymore. I don't remember the name of his wife now, but in any case, they had organized the meeting in a place called Brighton, which is south of London, and in a Unitarian church, okay? It was really a unhappy place because it was not very easy to be reached, and I had to take a train to go there. It was quite uncomfortable. So there were not many people. It was funny. It was a funny episode because Mr. Davis had planned to do a seminar in the morning from 10 to 12, and then an initiation ceremony from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. But by looking at the people, I probably sensed that there was not very much interest in the group. So I remember that he started at 10 o'clock. At about 11:30, he had already finished everything. And one of the funny episodes was at the end, after the initiation. I remember that he had brought with him the book's Guide to Kriya Yoga Practice. He had maybe 20 or 30 of those books with him, and he gave the book as a gift to all the people who were there. At a certain point, he was about to give the book to a lady, a young lady who was in the first line of seats, and the lady said, "Oh, do I really have to take it?" He said, "Why don't you want to take it?" And he was quite surprised, you know. And he said, "Oh, Mr. Davis, I have so much stuff to read already." That he didn't say anything, you know. He showed real equanimity in that instance. But I understood for the first time, was my first experience of that kind, and I understood that as a minister many years later, that sometimes you may, you know, you may do your best to give a message, but it's up to the people who are in front of you to get that message.
We have an expression: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. That was my first meeting. About 15 years later, I was with him in his chalet talking about many things. And I remember him, and I said, "Mr. Davis, do you remember the first time we met in person?" He said, "No, remind me." And I said, "Mr. Davis, we were in Brighton, I remember in 2000, when you gave the book to the lady who told you, 'Who do I really have to take it?'" And then he said, "Oh, yeah, now I remember, yeah." And then he gave me an affectionate kick to my foot and said, "I had forgotten it. Why did you remind me?"
That's such a great story. And it sounds like really from obviously from the beginning, when you saw him as a professional on the video, you connected with his messaging, and then when you met him in person, you had this lesson about, hey, you can't be attached to results with your students. So along the years, could you share with us other meaningful moments that stand out of where you either heard something from Roy or he said something to you personally and you learned a lesson from it? What were some of those moments you remember?
Well, there is one which happened about 1 week and a half before he passed. And I don't know if you are familiar with astrology, with Vedic astrology. I'm not an expert in the field, but there is a trustable person I know who is an expert in this field. His name is Atreya Smith, he's an astrologer. He told me during that period you will pass through a period of your life which in Sanskrit is called Sadesati, the period of Saturn. Okay, it will be quite challenging. Now, I'm not able to give you an explanation about what it means. You should ask an astrologer about that. But in any case, in that period of your life, which happens more or less to everybody a couple of times in your lifetime, and can be particularly challenging. During the peak phase of that period, Mr. Davis passed, and I had a small house on the top of a hill which burned down to ashes. Okay. And the reason why it was burned is really incredible. But in any case, we don't have to talk about this. Then the most important thing is another one. At that moment, in that moment of my life, I was quite scared about the event because I was putting money aside to buy a center on my own to use for my meditation group. And so I said to myself, if I have to spend the money to rebuild the house, I will have to use the money for that and not for the other purpose, which was more important for me. So I remember that the first thing I did, I wrote to Mr. Davis an email. I just wrote probably to have some emotional help in that moment because I was quite, Mr. Davis, I remember, he told me, okay, don't be alarmed. You work in the insurance field, so where you insured, say I was. Okay, so you will see that the insurance will take care of that. And that's exactly what happened. I didn't have to spend one dime. The insurance paid for everything, and even they paid directly the company who rebuilt the house. So I did not have to advance not even 1 cent. But, despite that, I was a little bit emotional in that specific moment of my life. And I remember that he wrote me that email. Then after 15 minutes, 20 minutes, he wrote me another email. And he told me, Furio, I know that you are putting money aside that you have collected from donations to build a center. Remember that if you have to rebuild your house at your own expense, you cannot use that money. Now, I did not need an advice of that kind because I hadn't thought of doing that. But I cried a little bit in that very moment because I realized that in that specific moment, what was more important for him was that I had to keep my integrity at any cost. When I was ordained in 2005, I was formally ordained in September. The 13th of September, this year will be 20 years since my ordination. I think that probably I'll do my best to be at CSA that day. It will happen on a Saturday, so I'll do my best to be there. I feel that I have to be there. I would like to spend the morning to meditate. Sorry. Okay. And I will have to be there. And but he asked me if I wanted to be ordained a few months before. It happened in May. And when he wrote me that I could teach Kriya Yoga to other people, he wrote me just a couple of things which were, in any case, very significant. He told me, when you teach Kriya Yoga, and you can do that, remember to do that in the classic way. Do not try to be original. In what we do, Joan, there are two kinds of work. You told me last time, and I share the idea. We have quality work and we have quantity work. For example, Paramahansa Yogananda did lots of quantity work. 90% of the content of his lessons are quantity work. Okay? I managed to get a copy of the original Precepta lessons that he wrote in the 20s and in the 30s. I have them all. Okay? And I read them very carefully. And 90% is quantity work. He had the intelligence and the sensitivity to do a syncretization between Christianity and yoga, so that he could communicate a certain kind of concepts to Christian people. Mr. Davis never did much quantity work. Basically, he didn't do quantity work at all. For us, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to relate to people by using quantity work, because it was always difficult for me. Okay? So when he told me, do that in the classic way and do not try to be original, Mr. Davis set a specific road for me that I have always felt that I have to follow quite strictly. That was a sense of responsibility. This doesn't mean that I cannot make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. Okay? When I was ordained, I was about 36, okay? And honestly, in that moment of my life, I couldn't teach anything to anyone. I was completely aware of that. But little by little, he told me, you will learn by doing, okay? And as I did, he told me, you will learn by doing as I did. So what I have understood over the years is that if you are faithful to the teachings that you follow, and if you are a minister, your responsibility is doubled because you also have to explain those things to other people. And you must do your best to let them have what you got, okay? And if you make soups, if you put together lots of stuff together, okay, without discernment, and this is common, unfortunately, because each of us, no matter if we like it or not, each of us has a baggage. Before doing Kriya Yoga, we have done other stuff. We have learned other things. And in our minds, all those things, they have to fit together in some way. So you have to be very attentive, very careful to put those things aside and do your best to give people what you have got. I understood by being a minister that being ordained by Roy Eugene Davis has given me an automatic credibility. So when you talk to people, unless you behave like a clown, if you are serious, people automatically think, oh, this man was ordained by a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. This man cannot be an idiot. So what he's saying is probably true. At the beginning, that was quite scary for me. I asked him a couple of times about this situation. I remember that in one occasion, he told me, don't be afraid to say, I don't know when you don't know something. Don't make it up. Okay, just because you want to feel important and you have to say something. So I tried in my life to follow these guidelines. But, you know, the boundary is quite limited. You don't have much room to go. You have to stay there, okay? But this was quite rewarding because there is a sentence that Mr. Davis always said. He said, there is a benevolent power nurturing the universe and we can learn to cooperate with it. And I discovered that that's really true. If you put your spiritual growth at the center of your life as the most important thing, and everything else you do is just you consider it as just something which revolves around your spiritual growth, and you don't consider spiritual growth simply as one of the many things that you do or you are interested in, okay, your life changes a lot. One time I asked Mr. Davis, how can I motivate people? And he answered, yes, you can do your best, speak well, be well groomed, be well dressed, and so on. But you have to understand that you can do that only up to a certain point. Motivation comes mainly from inside. Okay, that's the fact. So there is not, you can give an example, but you cannot do much more than that. Okay, so I discovered that there is an English proverb that I like incredibly much. When I try to translate it into English because I know it in Italian, and say, when a man raises his hand towards God, God lowers both hands and lifts him up. Does it make sense in English?
Yes, it's beautiful. I think that's
okay.
The Sistine Chapel, right? Adam and God are reaching for each other.
Yes, maybe. Okay. In any case, that's what we can do. That's what I do, and that's what I have always tried to do to the best of my ability. Obviously, I have made lots of mistakes.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that, and I'm taking away so many gems. And I remember Roy saying, Mr. Davis saying that discipline is not unpleasant. Discipline, and in your case, you described it as kind of staying in the lanes, right? Like I'm in this is my path and I'm staying on it. Discipline can be joyful because you let go of so many distractions that life becomes simple and clear. And so thank you for sharing that. And I also love that you said, as a minister, our responsibility is double, right? I think that is definitely the case. But could you describe a little bit? You said when you stay on the path and you put spiritual growth number one, your life changes. Tell us what happened in your life. You said, you were pretty dedicated, but you said, yeah, when I'm 36, I didn't know, couldn't share anything. What were some of the changes you saw over the years in your own life of how this benefited you?
There is one which is predominant respect all the others. Most people have fear of the unknown in some way. I don't have it anymore.
Wow. Say more about that. You don't have a fear. Well, I mean, you also went through losing a home.
Okay, we have to start from a sentence that Paramahansa Yogananda pronounced. He said, change is the only constant of life. Life is impermanent, okay? Situations changes. People die or move. What is good today may be not good tomorrow. Are banalities, but they are true. What I have realized, and I had so many episodes of this that I don't have to doubt it anymore, because I see this every moment. That whenever I have been in distress in my life, and it happened to me as I think it happens to every person in the world, there was a subtle intelligence which in some way opened a side door for me to go out where I had to go out, or to enter somewhere else where I had to enter somewhere else. I'm telling you a funny experience I had 2 weeks ago, okay, which is quite incredible. I don't think it happened to me because of the substance, real substance of what happened, but I think it happened to me just a reminder that there is a benevolent power nurturing the universe, and we can learn to cooperate with it. The town where I live is called Savona. Savona has more or less 70,000 inhabitants, okay? It's a small town, but small but not so small, okay? So remember, 70,000 people. 2 weeks ago, it was a Sunday morning. I needed money and I had to go to a ATM machine, a cash machine, to get the money. But I was very distracted. My mind was going here and there. So I went to the cash machine. I put my card in cash machine. I got 100 euros. Okay. The cash machine gave me the card back when I finished the operation. Okay. Then I went away and I left the money there. I didn't get the money. okay? I was absent-minded in that moment, so I simply left there the money. Then I walked, and I didn't think of it anymore. I had to go to the center of the town. I wanted to walk for 1 hour or so. There is a bar where I go every morning to get coffee before going to work. It's open also on Saturday and Sunday sometimes. That Sunday, her name is Sonia. She owns the bar. And that day, Sonia was open. So I saw her open, but it was 11:30. I was in the at the cash machine at about 11 o'clock in the morning. I walked for 3 or 4 kilometers, could be a couple of miles, okay? And then I went to the bar, and I remember that it was too late to get a coffee because in Italy we usually have coffee at 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. It was 11:30, so it was too late. And so I said, okay, give me a glass of wine, okay? So I got my glass of wine. At a certain point, I had to pay. I opened my wallet and I said, oh, where is the money? And in that very moment, I realized that I had left the money at the cash machine. I go there every day, so there was no problem. Say, Sonia, I will pay you tomorrow. You know, I did the stupidity of the day today. Say, what did you do? He said, I went to the cash machine in Villa Piana, the place, the zone where I live, and said, and I left the money there. So I will get some other money and I'll pay you tomorrow. I said, oh, don't worry. He said, yes. Then she lovingly told me, Furio, you are really a genius. Yes, I'm a genius. I'm like Wild Coyote, you know, I'm a super genius, okay? So I left the money at the cash machine. And she said, why don't you go back to take a look? He said, it's 3 or 4 kilometers from here. It happened 40 minutes ago. I don't think that there is a possibility that I can find the money there. And so I didn't go. I say, okay, the money is lost. Remember the fact that Savona has 70,000 inhabitants. On Tuesday, I had to go to a mechanic to bring my car. So at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I didn't go to the bar because I didn't work that day. I was somewhere else. At 2 o'clock, Sonia, the person who owns the bar, calls me on the phone and he said, Furio, you have no idea what happened today. He said, Marzia, is the name of this lady, has just entered the bar 10 minutes ago, and she told me these exact words. She said, Sonia, you have no idea what happened to my father on Sunday morning. He said, what happened? She was passing in front of a cash machine in Villa Piana at about, and then Sonia said, stop. And he found 100 euros and said, how can you know? It's Furio's money. Furio left that money on Sunday morning at the cash machine at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I know because he came here, he had to pay for his wine, and he didn't have the money because in that moment he realized that he had left his money at the cash machine, which was in another zone of the city. That zone of the city has about 15,000 inhabitants. Okay, the person who passed in front of the cash machine 5 minutes after me and took the money. Okay, on Monday he had been into the bank and said, I found 100 euros at the cash machine yesterday, and the employees of the bank had looked at him as he was an alien, because they say, why didn't you keep the money? And he said, because he was not honest to keep money which does not belong to me. And so they said, okay, if somebody calls here and claim that money, we will call you. But my bar woman preceded them. Now, did you understand the situation?
Yes, I'm loving it.
Winning the lottery would have been much easier.
Yes, it's so random.
That was basically impossible.
Right.
Now, now let's go to the substance of the fact. It's not 100 euros. Okay, I live through because of my salary, and I'm not a billionaire, so I don't like to throw away. 100 euros is about $108. Okay, so I don't like to throw that kind of money in the trash, but surely I wouldn't have been ruined because of that.
You weren't going to go hungry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. But this kind of stuff happens to me, and I'm sure about that, because being a teacher in the spiritual field, I have to be reminded sometimes that there is a benevolent power nurturing the universe, and we have to cooperate with it. So you asked me for experiences. That's a big one.
It is. It's a beautiful experience.
There are others of a similar kind, okay? There is one related to my house, just as an example. And I was insured not only for the house, but also for the furniture. But all the furniture which was inside the house was very old. I work in the insurance field, and I know how this kind of things works. Surveyor are paid by insurance companies, so they try to give you as little as possible. Okay? So when I had to declare how much all that stuff was worth, I had no idea. So I counted by memory all that was inside the house, and I made a list. And I said, if I had to buy this stuff new, I would spend at least 5,000 or 6,000 euros. Okay, but I don't think that the total value of the furniture was more than 10% of that sum. Okay. So he didn't ask me how much I thought it was worth. He asked, if you have to buy this stuff new, how much would you spend in your opinion? Okay. And I said, more or less 5,000 or 6,000 euros. Okay. Then he said, okay, we have to think about that. Okay. I know how this thing works because I work in that field, so it's normal stuff for me. Now, there is something not everybody knows. Surveyors get paid by the company when they finish their survey, and where the amount of money that they have to give to the insured person is accepted in some way, okay? We call it a quittance. You have to sign a document saying that the money they give you is it's okay for you, okay? That kind of discussion could have gone on for months, okay? That very day in which I had a talk with the surveyor, there was, the house which was burned to ashes is in a very small town where everybody knows each other. Okay. There was a piece of iron hanging from the roof, which made noise in the. There was a person living nearby. She said that she had been disturbed by the noise, and so she sent the police the day after. She sent the police when they were rebuilding the house. Okay. And they found a person who was working there without a contract. In that moment, the works are stopped by the local authorities, and they can remain stopped even for months. As soon as the surveyor happened to know this, he knew that he wouldn't have been paid by the company until everything was finished. So, in a matter of hurry, in less than 5 minutes, he called me on the phone and he said, okay, you will spend 600,000 euros to buy everything new. 3,500 euros is okay for you? Sure. I said, sure. It was not worth more than 500 euros what it was there. Okay? That was grace. I was in a big distress because there were some kind of expenses that the insurance didn't cover. But the money that I got from the furniture, okay, helped me to recover the other expenses which were not covered by the insurance. An atheist person may think that we are talking about strikes of luck. But it's not a strike of luck. Those kind of things happen to me. I'm not saying every day, but at least 2 or 3 times a year. Now I don't remember others, but if we stay here for a couple of hours, some other come to mind surely.
Well, what I'm taking away is that you've had direct experience of grace and blessing in your life, and because of that, you're not afraid of the unknown. I think that that's a huge. I mean, that's it, right? That is life. Because if we can go through life, as Yogananda said, unshaken in the crash of breaking worlds, whatever's happening in society, in the planet, in the world, in your own personal life, you have a sense of underlying peace and courage, and to just be there and see what unfolds.
Then, in a way, there are more important. Now, I was talking about material stuff, but something which happened to me many times is that, and it happened most of the time, was when I was not meditating and I was not thinking about that stuff. That maybe you needed to have a realization of an understanding of some kind, and sometimes they just pop up in your mind when you are not thinking about that. You know, there is I talk about scientific prayer before that. There is a very effective way of praying which works all the time. When you don't know what to do in a certain situation, when you have to face a certain situation, a challenging situation, okay, if you know what to do, do what you do. Do what you know you have to do, sorry. Okay. But if you don't know what to do, just be faithful about the fact that a superior intelligence which is inside and outside of you at the same time will take care of the situation, and stop thinking about the problem. This works all the time. Maybe not in the way you expect, but usually in a better way. That's my experience. It happened so many times in my life that I don't have any doubt anymore.
I love it. And I think that's one of the reasons we named the podcast Spirit Led, is just to say sometimes we have to surrender our little minds and just say, God is taking care of this.
But it's not a passive state.
No, not
because
passive.
There is something you have to do. You must keep your faith high. You can do little by little, because faith must be built little by little. Not many people have big faith, okay? But little by little, you may build your faith. And by practicing meditation every single day, what happens is that little by little, faith is replaced by knowledge.
Oh, I love that. When you practice meditation every day, little by little, faith is replaced by knowledge. That was worth having you on the podcast.
And that's and the most important thing that you have to understand, that people has to understand. You cannot force spiritual growth to happen in any way. You can do your best to do your practices, to be faithful, to do whatever you want, but spiritual growth takes place at the right moment, little by little. Sometimes you may have to face difficult periods in your life. That's okay. It happens. It means that you have to face problems. You know, problems are a constant of life. You don't have to expect them, because otherwise, if you do that, you will have tons more to face in your life. But you have to consider the possibility that problems are always there. It's how you react. I remember that the last day we talked about equanimity, to the concept of equanimity, which is basically a Buddhist concept. But more or less the meaning can be shared also in the yoga philosophy, because more or less we're saying the same thing. In Buddhism, if I'm not mistaken, they say that you have to, in order to be enlightened, you have to develop 4 different qualities. One is compassion, the other is equanimity, the other is altruistic joy, and the last one is love. Be equanimous is not something which belongs to this world. But also because sometimes, especially as long as we are in an ordinary state of consciousness, sometimes it is better to react and to say something than to implode and to hurt yourself, okay? Equanimity is not something that you can pretend to have. Either you have or you don't have it, okay? You can build little by little by learning first not to react emotionally to what happens to you, to do some karma yoga, to do something without expecting a reward, you know. Mr. Davis once told me that you can control much of your life by controlling your conversations, by paying attention to what you say or what you don't say. And in one occasion, he told me one thing which I did not understand at first, but then after a while, I understood what it meant. He told me, when you hear somebody say something that you think is really untrue, or that you don't believe in it, or you think is even something bad or something like that, be certain not to accept it mentally, even if you don't say anything. Don't accept it at a mental level. Sometimes it's okay if when we have to react, when we talk to people, we say nothing because we don't want to quarrel. That's okay. Okay? But on a mental level, remain on guard. I think that what he meant.
Yes.
Okay. Yogananda was even more dramatic about that subject. He said, when you meet somebody you talk to somebody and he says something that you really know is not true or is very bad, deny him and go away. I remember I read this sentence in one of the Precepta lessons many years ago. It remained in my... I still remember.
It's good advice for equanimity because we're, now we live with a lot of media, right? And so we can turn some of it off, not look at it, but also some of the messages come through if we can decide mentally not to accept them. I think that's very good advice.
Sure.
Well, Furio, I think that we could just hang out all evening. We can keep talking because you have many lessons, and we didn't really get to all the questions that we thought we might talk about, but I would love to invite you back and we could have another session.
Whenever you want.
But I think I took away so many things that you said, and you talked about staying focused, staying balanced on your path. When you know that what the truth is, just do it. You talked about grace. You gave us some great examples of how the benevolent presence is nurturing us in the universe. And you told us some stories about how Mr. Davis taught you, what he said to you and what he taught you. And also I really picked up from you that you have studied deeply the words of Mr. Davis and Yogananda, that you live by them. You live the words. And I just want to thank you for sharing all that with us.
It was a pleasure.
Yes.
May I give you a suggestion, a very, very friendly one?
Please.
Mr. Davis started writing books when he was about 30 years old. And I don't know if it's good for everybody, but for a minister, it can be useful, I think, to read also his oldest books. And if you compare his oldest books to the most recent ones, you will have a broad view about how he evolved over the years. If you read a book that he wrote in the 60s, and if you read his last book, you will see that the concept he expressed are more or less the same, but the insights that he had inside those concepts were completely different. I learned this because I translated many articles and many books. Okay, he always told me, don't get too much stuff from my old books. Or if you do that, make sure that what you get in your article, in your translations, are compatible with what I'm saying now. But that was very interesting because by reading the oldest books, I managed to understand that the state of consciousness that he had in the last years was the result of an evolution process that we also face every day, every week, every month, every year. Sometimes we don't think about how we were yesterday, okay? That's why I suggested people to write down their thoughts, emotions, ideas, and so on. Because when you read them after years, sometimes you may happen to say to yourself, how could I have been so silly to write such a thing? Because the state of consciousness that you had at that time was that one. Okay? So also people like Mr. Davis undergo a process of evolution. So that's a suggestion for all the ministers.
No, okay? I love that
especially
suggestion.
the youngest one, because maybe they have read only the most recent books, which is okay, absolutely. But sometimes having the possibility to notice, at least it was useful for me, having the possibility to notice that there was an evolution in the character of Mr. Davis, may help you realize that also your life, our lives, will undergo the same kind of process. When I was 10 years old and I finished the elementary school, I was 10, okay? We had a teacher, her name was Caterina Prosio was her name, okay? She died maybe 15 years ago. She was more than 19 years of age, I remember. And there was a custom in my school. We all took a diary. Yes, I think the name is diary, okay? And we used to give this diary to all the other pupils of the class, okay? They made a drawing and on it, on each page, and with a small dedication, okay? So that you could remember them after years.
Yes, it's a grade book or like a book to recognize the graduating class.
Okay.
Yes.
At the end, our school teacher, she got all the diaries and she wrote a sentence for each one of us. Do you know what she wrote to me?
Tell me.
She wrote, "Dear Furio, remember that the greatest victory in life is not upon others, but upon ourselves. By trying to be today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today."
Wow, what a great message.
That sentence, in my opinion, my school teacher was a normal person. She was not a Kriya Yogi, but she was a very wise woman. She taught me a lot. And I had very good role models in life. I've been lucky. I've been blessed from that viewpoint. And basically, I think that the spiritual path is we have to walk the spiritual path with that attitude, by trying to be today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. When we do our seminars, we always finish them with this sentence each time, because I think it's the right motivation for people. So I wanted to share this also with our listeners.
Well, yep. Furio, we had talked about closing the podcast with something that I found on your website that I just thought was beautiful.
About in 2002, so we're about 20 years ago, I was in southern France, and I remember I visited the graveyard, and there was a grave of a person, if I remember well, it was a woman. And she died in the 60s. So the the inscription that I read on the grave caught my attention, because in Europe it's quite unusual to read an inscription of that kind. More or less, the inscription said, I think it was at least partially taken from the Bhagavad Gita. He said, the inscription said, "There was not a time when I did not exist, and there won't be a time when I'll cease to exist. For every end, there is soon a new beginning." I really love that. So after, I remember that I was thinking about that inscription one day, and I had this reflection which came to mind, and that I built it starting from that inscription that I had found on that grave. We live in an ocean of divine intelligence. Intelligence is the subtle substrate of everything that exists. When you walk, meditate, or simply breathe, do your best to be aware of this omnipresent intelligence that is within and without you. All of your thoughts and emotions are its thoughts and emotions. Each of your cells is formed and held together with the others by this eternal and omnipresent intelligence. You are it, and it is you. Do not be afraid of losing your individuality, for it is just an illusion. This intelligence has always existed and will never cease to exist. End and beginning are only dreams of the small sense of self.
Thank you for tuning in to the Spirit-Led Podcast. Special thanks to our producer, Monty Craig. Please subscribe to catch upcoming episodes. For support in your awakening journey, visit our sponsor, the Center for Spiritual Awareness at csa-davis.org. We offer online group meditations, classes, and in-person retreats at our headquarters in Lakemont, Georgia. Once again, that's csa-davis.org. Until next time, remember your pure essence of being, an eternal relationship with the infinite.